that. What is socialism? I learned in school when I was a kid that socialism is everyone gets paid the exact same wage no matter how hard they work. And so then everyone's lazy because that's what socialism is. I've had other people, the more common definition you get now is socialism is whenever the government does anything. If the government does something, that's socialism. The USA, I've heard, is half socialist and half capitalist because we have Social Security and the post office and the US military, but we also have private companies. There's many different definitions of socialism. The first use of the word socialism was in France. It was Henry Saint-Simon, and he was a French religious man who was worried that after the French Revolution, all these people were unemployed, and factory owners at that point were like raping women who worked in their factories and mistreating them, and it was a feeling there was something wrong with liberalism, which was the ideology of the French Revolution. They didn't say they believed in capitalism; they said they believed in liberalism, individual rights. And Henry Saint-Simon said, well, maybe in contrast to this liberalism, we need socialism. But he never really explained what it was, but he did a lot of charity work, and he opened some cooperative businesses, and that was Henry Saint-Simon, and he used the word socialism in French. The first person to use the word socialism in English was Robert Owen, and Robert Owen was a Welsh factory owner, and he started a colony called New Lanark, and it was a cooperative, commune that existed in Scotland for a while, and he eventually moved it to Indiana, and set it up in the US state of Indiana. It was called New Harmony. And it's still there, you can see it. It's a nice little, they got a museum there, and it was this cooperative that Robert Owen built. And he actually addressed a session of the US Congress and gave a lecture on socialism. And he was the first guy to coin the term socialism. But Karl Marx distinguished scientific socialism from utopian socialism. Henry Saint-Simon, Robert Owen, others, they were utopian socialists. But Karl Marx described himself as a scientific socialist. And he described socialism this way. He said, "We have seen above that the first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of the ruling class and to win the battle for democracy. The proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by degree all capital from the bourgeoisie, to centralize all instruments of production into the hands of the state, and of the proletariat organized as the ruling class, and to increase the productive forces as rapidly as possible." That's what Karl Marx laid out as his vision of socialism. Now, Friedrich Engels, he described socialism. He said, "The proletariat seizes the public power, and by means of this transforms the socialized means of production, slipping from the hands of the bourgeoisie into public property. By this act, the proletariat frees the means of production from the character of capital they have borne thus far, and gives their socialized character complete freedom to work itself out. Socialized production upon a predetermined plan becomes possible. The development of production makes the existence of different classes of society henceforth an anachronism. In proportion as anarchy and social production vanishes, the political authority of the state eventually dies out. Man at last is the master of his own form of social organization, and he becomes at the same time the lord over nature, his own master free. To accomplish this act of universal emancipation is the historical mission of the proletariat, to thoroughly comprehend the historical conditions and this very nature of this act, to impart to the now oppressed proletarian class a full knowledge of the conditions and of the meaning of this momentous act is called upon to accomplish. This is the task or the theoretical expression of the proletarian movement of scientific socialism." So what is the idea? Well, the idea is in capitalism you have these means of production that are privately owned. And under capitalism, profit is the basis of the economy. Houses and buildings like this don't get built because people need a nice place to have classes. They're built so that landlords and bankers can make profit. Food isn't produced so that people can eat it. Food is produced so that agribusiness and big box stores can make money by selling it. Profit is the basis of the economy. And socialism is when the proletariat, the working class, the majority of society, takes control of the government, and then through the government seizes control of the means of production. The economy is then forced to work in the interests of society overall. You have production upon a predetermined plan rather than production for profit. And that's the difference between capitalism and socialism. And it's pretty vague. I recently debated an advocate of more liberal social democratic capitalism. And he kept insisting that in my defense of socialism that I lay out and explain exactly what things would be nationalized and what things would not be nationalized. Well, that's Robert Owen. Robert Owen would do that, right? Henry Saint-Simon might do that. But that's utopianism. Socialism comes about due to this contradiction between the worker and the capitalist, and eventually driving the workers to rise up and seize control of the means of production. And socialism looks very, very different. And Marx predicted that socialism would happen first in the first world. He was existing in the period of industrial capitalism, and he assumed eventually the workers would just rise up and seize control of their factories. That's not what happened, because capitalism moved on to its period of imperialism, where you had the labor aristocracy and the rising standard of living in the first world, and it was countries in the developing world breaking out of the control of Western bankers. That was what socialism was. It was countries around the world that had been kept in feudal or semi-feudal conditions and been unable to develop because of imperialism, and it was them rising up, seizing control of their economies, and building socialism.